Good morning. I hope all of you are having a good day. There. Well, that's better for me. I don't know how it's better for you. So, if you can't hear me, or if you're having trouble with the video, please make a comment and I'll be able to see that on the side panel here. So here we are, 6 weeks into COVID-19. Actually, we're starting week 7. Is everybody getting a little bit a cabin fever? Yeah? Okay. I hear you. So today we're going to be looking at what does it mean to live in an age where we are talking about sheep and shepherds. So, because that might seem kind of anachronistic for most of us. I'd like to begin with a prayer. Let us pray. Gracious God, who creates, sustains, and redeems all life, we come seeking your disturbing presence and comforting peace. We praise you for the joy of being your people. May your Spirit be with us and move us in this time of worship. Give us hearts that hear your word and minds that are open to the transforming power of your love. Amen. I hope some of you were able to follow the link I posted on YouTube to The Lord is My Shepherd. It was a great sing-along version of it that I found with lyrics and music as well. So I'm going to skip the reading of from Psalm 23. It's known very well to most of you. The Lord is my shepherd. Instead, I'm going to be reading to you from the Gospel according to John, chapter 10, verses 1 to 10. Very truly, I tell you, anyone who does not enter the sheepfold by the gate, but climbs in by another way, is a thief and a bandit. The one who enters by the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep hear his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all his own, he goes ahead of them, and the sheep follow him because they know his voice. They will not follow a stranger, but they will run for him because they do not know the voice of strangers. Jesus used this figure of speech with them, but they did not understand what he was saying to them. So again, Jesus said to them, very truly, I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. All who came before me are thieves and bandits, but the sheep did not listen to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters by me will be saved and will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and destroy. I came that they might have life and have it abundantly. I'm also going to be reading from the book of Acts, chapter 2, verses 42 to 47, which describes the early Christian community. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and fellowship, to the breaking of bread and the prayers. Awe came upon everyone, because many wonders and signs were being done by the apostles. And all who believed were together and had all things in common. They would sell their possessions and goods and distribute the proceeds to all, as any had need. Day by day, as they spent much time together in the temple, they broke bread at home and ate their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having the sincerity of all the people. And day by day the Lord added to their number those who were being saved. Well, on this Good Shepherd Sunday, as it's called, it's a reminder for those of us who are pastors that another definition of pastor is shepherd. And indeed, it's one of the roles that we play as ministers. Now, the pastor is a shepherd, but pastors need pastors as well. And so the Pope is sometimes called the shepherd of the shepherds, which has led some people to wonder, when Pope Benedict was elected, was he a German shepherd? Which reminds me of another story I heard about shepherds. There was a German shepherd, a golden retriever, and a cat that went into heaven at the same time, and they appeared before the throne of God. And God said, well, what do you have to say for yourselves? And the German shepherd said, well, I am loyal and I am obedient. And then the golden retriever said, I am friendly and loving. And then God said to the cat, well, what do you have to say for yourself? And the cat said, I believe you're in my seat. Cat owners will get that one. Well, we call this Good Shepherd Sunday, but it's really about the sheep. If we called it Good Sheep Sunday, I don't think it would work quite as well. And there's an interesting thing. Sheep are sheep. There's no such thing as sheeps. Sheep are singular and sheep are plural. Although when I was a child, I thought there was such a word as sheep, because we sang that song, Bringing in the Sheeps. I didn't know what sheeps were, so I thought we were bringing in the sheeps. It took me a while to find out that wasn't correct. Now, congregations are also called flocks, which is interesting. A group of alligators is called a congregation. A little bit of trivia there for you to hold on to. Now, being a member of a flock means that you are a member of a community. Communities are not necessarily organized. And when you think of that early Christian community, it must have been absolute chaos. From Acts 1, we hear that in Jerusalem, let me read the list. There were Parthians, Medes, Elamites, people from Macedonia, Judea, Cappadocia, Pontus and Asia, Phrygia, Pamphylia, Egypt, and parts of Libya, Romans, Jews, and proselytes. That would have been quite a crowd. How would you negotiate all those differences of language and culture and religious traditions? If you're trying to think about what that would be like, think about being in an international airport. Okay, think about the cacophony of languages that you would hear. Imagine then that there are 3,000 people there. Now, try to imagine making a community out of those 3,000 people. I think you get the idea of how difficult that would have been. So how did the first believers form a community? You hear about them all being together, sharing their meals and being all together, which makes you wonder, who cooked, who baked, and most of all, who cleaned up? We aren't given those details. Some people speculate it might have been the women. Hopefully, they were a little more egalitarian and equal than that. And then just when they got things organized, what happens? More people show up. So then you have to reconfigure all of what you had already designed and ordered, because newcomers are coming in. And they were doing an interesting thing. They were forming a community that had no boundaries. Most communities are pretty easy to define who's in and who's out. Even just by definition. If I join a shuffleboard group, for example, okay, and someone does not, well, then I'm in that group and they're out of that group. It's not discrimination, it's just discrimination in a way, but by definition, not by intent or exclusion. But here we are, this new community, and they don't have a sense of who's in and who's out. They just know that everybody is being called. Now, the sharing of all the goods, I remember, was a bit problematic back in, the 60s. There were people who kind of glossed over that verse because it sounded kind of communist to them. Well, I don't think we can call it communist, that they shared all things. If anything, it was pre-capitalist. There was no such thing as capitalism at that time. They didn't have a concept of personal possessions. Anything that belonged to them also belonged to their family, to their tribe, and to their nation. So when they made this new allegiance to this group of Jesus followers, sometimes they had to break with those families and clans and tribes to form a new idea of who they were. And although that sounds like it would have been troubling to them, they shared their joy. Joyful is a word you often hear about this new community. Now, every community needs some kind of a shepherd. And in John 10, verses 1 to 10, Jesus described himself as the good shepherd. He also described himself as a gate. I think the reason for this is that in ancient practice, and still in some Arab communities today, the sheep go into the sheepfold. But the gate is not something that swings on hinges or can be closed. The gate is the shepherd, because the shepherd lies down in the gap and so protects the sheep so that no one can come in or go out without getting past the shepherd. The flocks were mingled. They were not individualized. There was not one sheep that was more important than another one. And so in 1 Peter, he talks about the communal good. He's not talking to or about individuals. Now, this passage has some have been a little uncomfortable with it because it seems to talk about suffering and that suffering is being a good thing. Well, first of all, suffering is never a good thing. That's been used, unfortunately, to keep people in abusive relationships or passive under some kind of tyranny. And no, that is not a good in and of itself. However, the suffering for the good is a whole different concept. And if you want to see or think of some examples of those, let us be reminded of Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. and also of Mahatma Gandhi. They proposed nonviolence and civil disobedience, not civil criminality. Their resistance was nonviolent. It was nonverbal. And it was ultimately successful. So this, I think, is what Peter meant when he was writing about suffering because of the good is grace-filled. Now, our society, unfortunately, defines happiness as being our ultimate good. It is our ultimate goal to be happy. Now, the American Constitution says something about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, I believe in our Canadian Bill of Rights, we have life and liberty and also good government. Just shows you how different we are as Canadians and what we value. But because we put such a high priority on happiness, we are sometimes uncomfortable with something that is unpleasant. We want to get rid of it as soon as possible. You know, talking about injustice and racism is very uncomfortable for most of us. And so we try to get rid of it as quickly as possible and talk about other people who are doing that discriminating. You know, I just saw on TV this morning that people who are of Asian descent are finding themselves attacked verbally or in other ways as being the reason that COVID-19 has spread around the world. And we have found that actually, in many cases, that is not true. In North America, that spread came from Europe. And so, and also the ban on Chinese immigration or coming into the United States was not against all Chinese people. Okay, Chinese Americans were allowed to come in. Okay, and in some cases go back and come in again. So the people who were held back by that ban were people who were Chinese nationals. So I think we need to make ourselves aware of those things, because we might not have the answers when people talk about, well, those Asians brought it in. Similarly, here in Chatham-Kent, we've had an increase, I think almost a doubling of the number of cases of COVID-19 linked to a greenhouse. And it's spread among the migrant workers who are in rather tight, close quarters in their dormitories. However, they did not bring that in from Mexico, Honduras, or wherever they came from. When they came in, they had to do their 14 days quarantine, just like anyone else. And actually, it was a local person that infected the first worker and then spread, unfortunately, throughout the rest of that community. So be armed with facts so that when you encounter those conversations that make you uncomfortable because they're being racist or xenophobic, that you have the ammunition by which to respond. And you know, we talk about COVID-19 as being something that discriminates equally between Black and white people, rich and poor people. Unfortunately, that is not the truth. Okay, there are more people who are Black, who are brown, who are Asian, people who are Latino, Native, and people who are living in poverty, who are being disproportionately afflicted with this disease. And why would that be? Well, it's nothing to do with genetics. It has everything to do with, again, racism. It has everything to do with the fact that many of these marginalized communities lived in poverty. Many of them have eaten basically what you would call poor food, food that is heavily in carbohydrates because they're cheaper. And so that is why there is a greater risk of diabetes and of other things. So we also need to think about the fact that along with our medical workers, who the doctors, nurses, and all of the staff in hospitals, there are other heroes that work behind the scenes in hospitals. People who are technicians, people who do those tests, people who are respiration technologists, people who are imaging technicians and technologists, those people are equally at risk. And so, yes, I think it's important to remember that all of those people who work in hospitals, because a hospital is a micro community. People live there, people sleep there, people eat there. It is a 24-hour community for many people. But I want to get back to our other essential workers for a moment. Those people who are working in grocery stores in particular. We are calling them essential workers, and we're also calling them heroes. Now, I wonder if that is actually a descriptive way of referring to people. They are going in, yes, every day in some cases, and they are putting themselves at risk for our sake. But do they really have a choice? Are they single income people who are trying to support their families, for whom not working is simply not an option? The other thing we need to think about is the fact that most of these grocery workers are working for minimum wage. So while we're calling them heroes and essential workers, will we also remember that they were not paid at the same rate that they should have been? Maybe that other essential workers were being paid. And also the people who collect the garbage, who do other things on behalf of our municipalities. We need to look at their working conditions and also what kind of incomes they have, what kind of benefits they have, so that we can remember that we need to keep calling them heroes long after the stores have opened their doors and we're all able to go back to work. Now, I think we need to think about what life will be like in post-COVID-19. I've been thinking that maybe we should refer to this as the years AC, after COVID-19. It almost seems like there is a break between those two times. And I think that it's quite possible that we're going to go on in some way, be more open. Now, I don't think we're ready yet to open our doors and have thousands of people come in. We'd have to really start a building campaign, wouldn't we? But let's be open to maybe having thousands of people join us on social media. Wouldn't that be wonderful? We're already getting what I call more views than views every Sunday. There are more viewers on Facebook and on YouTube than we normally see in church. And some of those people are ones that we don't see very often. Maybe we will bring them into the flock. Maybe our flock will be redefined. Maybe we'll need to be more open. In whatever way we're being called, God is asking us to be a shepherd of each other, because we all need that care. We all need to be on guard for one another against discrimination, perhaps against thoughtlessness. It can be something simple, but we can all do it. So remember, pick up the phone, call somebody who you think might be isolated. Remember somebody in prayer. Many of us are thinking about Tanya and what she's going through right now. And I think we need to hold her in prayer and to remember that everyone grieves in their own way. And we need to have the grace to allow that to happen. We follow the ultimate shepherd, the shepherd who laid himself down so that he might be a gate and that we might pass through that gate into the kingdom of heaven, the ultimate life of ultimate good. And this is good news for us today. Thank you for joining me here today. Hopefully we will get together sometime this week I'm trying to get a Zoom meeting scheduled for Wednesday at 1 p.m. I'll send out more details. I'm just having a little bit of trouble scheduling it right now. So I don't know if you'll get an auto message, but I'm going to be sending that out probably by email. Thank you. God bless you. Go carefully and walk with one another, if not together, then in peace. Amen. May it be so.